Does he understand why the people of these islands, especially those of us in Scotland, treat him with such contempt? Mr Speaker, before the election, this Prime Minister said he would lower energy bills by £300. Since he took office, they've gone up by £149. He said he would protect the winter fuel payment, but now he's in power, he's stripped it off our pensioners. And he said he lined up for many photos with waspy women, saying he'd have their backs, and he's just betrayed them in the most scandalous way possible. This is now the defining characteristic of this one-trick phony Prime Minister who says one thing and does another. In Scotland, the SNP are 16 points ahead in the polls. Does he understand? Does he understand why the people of these islands, especially those of us in Scotland, treat him with such contempt?
They used to ask those questions. They used to ask those questions from this sort of area with very many MPs not so long ago. That all changed in July, and he's now carping from right up there. We can hardly hear him.
Good day and welcome back to British Report. Right, lock the doors and brace yourselves because the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has just been subjected to a public political vivisection at the hands of cross-party members of Parliament. This wasn't a gentle chat. This was an hour-long, full-scale annihilation at the Liaison Committee that left Starmer visibly wounded, cornered and utterly defensive. The headline here is that Starmer didn't just get grilled. He exploded after he was destroyed by MPs who forced him to confront the cruel human cost of his most controversial policies. We are talking about the inheritance tax raid on farmers and the catastrophic ongoing junior doctors' strike, two issues where Starmer's political rhetoric has completely detached from reality. The exchanges were brutal, revealing a Prime Minister who is both out of touch with rural Britain and dangerously dismissive of the NHS's front line. A combination that will truly end his shaky credibility. Quick favour, if you're looking for the sharpest, most unvarnished truth about what went down in Westminster's toughest committee, hit that subscribe button. Over 92% of viewers haven't yet. It's free. Takes a second and means the world to us. Thanks if you did. Now back to the show, because the committee, made up of the chairs of all the select committees, is the ultimate political firing squad, and Starmer walked right into the crosshairs. Let us begin with the jaw-dropping moment that defines this entire appearance: the inheritance tax raid on family farms. This policy, which imposes a textiles and 20% tax on farm estates worth over, for text, $1 million, has already caused a major rebellion on Starmer's own backbenches, and the MPs at the Liaison Committee were ready to exploit this massive rift. The Prime Minister was asked by a Labour MP representing a heavily rural seat about the most terrifying, most heartbreaking consequence of this policy. Reports that farmers facing terminal diagnoses are being pushed to the brink of suicide to avoid the new changes. The question put to Starmer was chillingly direct. Was he aware that some farmers who have terminal diagnoses are now actively planning to expedite their own deaths before the tax raid comes into effect in April? Starmer's response was not one of shock, horror or empathy. It was the chillingly detached, one-word admission that he was aware of these reports before he launched into a defence of the policy as sensible reform designed to raise revenue. This is the point of the total annihilation, the moment that truly ends. Keir Starmer's claim to be a compassionate leader. The rural MPs were merciless, hammering him on the fact that he was failing to engage with the human impact of the tax. The simple truth that this policy is not hitting Jeremy Clarksons or billionaires, as the Treasury claimed, but asset-rich, cash-poor family farms. Starmer was forced to admit that the purpose of the tax was purely to raise revenue, to boost the NHS and balance the books, explicitly stating that if family farms have to be sold to pay the tax, then that is fine by him. He dismissed the devastating impact on long-term food security and the obliteration of multi-generational businesses with the cold, hard logic of a Treasury spreadsheet. His refusal to budge, despite the desperate warnings from his own MPs and the entire farming community about the mental health crisis and the genuine fear of business destruction, has confirmed to rural Britain that Labour sees them as nothing more than a source of cash for his urban spending plans. Now, if you thought that was the end of the public excoriation, you were sorely mistaken, because the questioning moved swiftly from the fields to the hospitals. Starmer was immediately plunged into the crisis of the junior doctors' 5-day strike, which is set to wreak havoc on the NHS just before the peak winter period. Conservative MP Simon Hoare, the man with the gift for the perfectly phrased political ambush, asked Starmer, on a scale of 1 to 10, how gutted are you about the BMA's latest strike action vote? Starmer, adopting a tone of injured authority, declared, 10 out of 10. It's irresponsible at any time, particular at the moment. He then added the politically toxic line that the action comes on the back of a very substantial pay increase last year and is simply irresponsible action by the BMA, and not for the first time. This is the moment Starmer explodes his own credibility with the health service. Hoare, the Tory, pounced on the political weakness Starmer had just exposed, essentially saying it may be irresponsible, but it's not actually surprising, is it? You gave them a massive pay rise last year with no productivity improvements linked at all. The BMA thinks they've got the government over a barrel. Starmer could only weakly claim that's not going to happen, before resorting to dubious statistics about 5 million extra appointments and appealing to the doctors themselves to push back against the BMA. A desperate, divisive plea. The sheer hypocrisy of the former human rights lawyer branding the doctors as irresponsible while defending a tax policy that literally risks farmers taking their own lives is a moral contradiction that is now impossible to ignore. He is the industrial hardliner on one hand and the heartless taxman on the other, confirming that the Prime Minister's single greatest policy priority is simply protecting the Treasury's bottom line, regardless of the human fallout. The liaison committee didn't just question Starmer, it publicly and spectacularly dismantled his entire moral and political platform, leaving him exposed as a technocrat utterly detached from the consequences of his own policies. This humiliation, broadcast for all to see, will truly be remembered as the point that sealed his fate. For more on the doctors' view of the dispute, you can watch Health Secretary says doctors' strikes are self-indulgent, irresponsible and dangerous.